you already know how to find the scales and arpeggios for each chord, and you also know how to put that together and play a line on that chord. But when you're soloing, it still sounds like you're just playing something on this chord and then something else on the next chord. And if you listen to somebody like Wes, then you hear a solo that's a story, that's a complete piece of music. He's not just playing something on D minor and then something else on A7. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can improve the skills and make it possible for yourself to play solos that are a complete piece of music and not just a bunch of random licks next to each other. My name is Jens Larsen, learn jazz, make music. I'm going to go over 5 examples that are going to show you how you can start playing more connected lines over changes in your solos. And you can use them as blueprints for your own lines that you write, and in that way try to get it into your playing. In a way, the 3 main concepts that I'm working on with this video are really sort of a holy trinity of Beethoven, Muddy Waters and Rosenwinkel. The material I'm using here is really kept simple, so it's just a 2-5-1 in the key of C major, and for each of the chords I have 2 arpeggios. I have the one from the root and then the one from the third. That sounds like this. And of course I also have a C major scale. If you want to explore more options when it comes to using diatonic arpeggios in improvisations and different ways of playing them, then check out this video that I'm linking to in the video description. One way to connect phrases in a solo is to use motivic development. And essentially, motivic development is playing a phrase and then developing or changing that phrase on the next chord, but still using something that sounds similar and that way connecting the 2 phrases. This is something that's extremely powerful and also used very much in music all over the place. Just ask Ludwig. And in the example, I'm being pretty obvious about how this works. So I have this motif on the D minor 7. And I'm just moving that up and playing the same thing on the G7, just using the G7 arpeggio instead of the D minor. And then resolving that to C major. Using sort of a more developed version of it on the C major 7, where I'm changing the motif quite a bit, but it's still just a basic arpeggio melody. Maybe it's a guitar thing, but chord response to me is really something that I associate with the blues. But you will find examples of this in all kinds of music. It's also one of those very common melodic devices. And in this case, I'm using that on the 2-5-1, where we have sort of a question or a call part that's the ascending line on the D minor 7. So. And then we get a response on the G7, which is then a descending line that's kind of closing down the question again and answering it. So we get. And then a tag on the C major 7. When you're working with motifs, then of course when you're studying in the beginning, you want to just move things around. Most of the time that's going to be sort of transposing, or at least transposing diatonically what's happening. But you can also be much more creative with the motifs. And in fact, it's more important that you get a melody that fits the chord and sounds good than you get one that is sort of the correct way of moving the motif. And that's what's happening here in this example. First we have a descending F major 7 arpeggio. And then I'm using a D7 arpeggio, so I have a different kind of movement than just moving in parallel with the chords, because I'm moving down a whole step. But instead of playing an E minor, I'm still playing the G7 arpeggio. So I'm changing the melody a little bit and then adding a few notes to just resolve back to C major 7. To keep everything a little bit compact and easy to digest, then I'm working with these pretty short 2-5-1 progressions in the lesson. But really, if you work on this, of course, first you want to try it out just to get used to it on a short progression, just to get the idea and start hearing melodies like this. But then later you have to take it to complete songs. Because if you listen to how people are using it, like let's take somebody like Wes, then very often he will use this on an entire section or maybe an entire chorus of a song, and that's also what you want to do with it. In the beginning it can be difficult to hear with some artists, but if you start listening a little bit more closely, then you start hearing how they work with it. One of the things I learned from a Rosenwinkel masterclass that he gave at the conservatory where I studied was that he really worked on keeping a melodic idea or a melodic direction while he's soloing through changes. And he did this already with technical exercises. So if I play a scale exercise through a 2-5-1 with an alto dominant, then that could be something like this. So the melodic idea here is just moving in the scale, and I want to keep that going when I move from the D minor to the G7 altered, and also from the G7 altered back to the C major 7, and that demands that I have a certain type of overview. But if you start making lines where you think, okay, I'm really gonna take a melodic direction and then keep that going through the changes, then that's gonna tie everything together, because you have to keep the same direction, the same melodic idea happening throughout the entire line. And that's what's happening here. In this example, I'm also using an ascending movement throughout the 2-5-1 and then resolving it on the C major 7. So it's really first scale movement, then a triad, but I keep on moving up, and we get this sort of pedal point idea as well on the G7. And then resolving on the C major 7 and tagging that. And of course you can do the same thing with a descending melody instead of an ascending melody, and that's what I have here. And also here I'm using some motifs. So first we get this melody, so the D minor triad used as a melody, and then a descending scale one, and then a repeat of the original first motif, so but still keeping this direction going down, and then resolving to C major. The previous examples were all using really just basic diatonic harmony, keeping it really simple. But of course you can also use alto dominants, and in some ways that actually makes it a little bit easier, because you can voice lead more things and you get new sounds on the next chord. In this example I'm using a part of a line that I transcribed from Benson to introduce an alto dominant. So the first part of it is just a really basic D minor with a leading note, so and then we get an F major 7 arpeggio. And then this is voice led into an F half diminished arpeggio. And of course F half diminished is a G7 with a flat 9 and a flat 13, so that's what I'm using here. And then resolving that to this on the C major 7, which is the 9th and the major 7. And then continuing down the E minor 7 arpeggio. And that way we kind of have this voice movement happening that's coming from F major 7 to F half diminished to E minor 7 on the C major. As you can see in this Benson inspired example, then it's really useful to have different types of arpeggios that you can use on the different chords, and in that way sort of create some different voice leading and some new melodies using those structures. So you want to know a lot of different arpeggios and triads that you can use on each of the chords. And one video where I'm going over this, where I'm talking about how to find triads and also how to use them both on static chords and 2-5-1 progressions, is this one, and that's really worthwhile checking out if you want to develop a solid vocabulary of arpeggios for each of the chords that you improvise over.